Today's gonna be a little bit different, just a tiny bit different. Okay, so if I had to pick a theme for this video, it would be one of the thoughts, like if you're scrolling through Instagram or whatever social media you use and you see some interesting topic and you get like really over fixated on it. See, this interesting phenomenon happens to me a lot, way more than you'd expect. So I decided I was going to make one of my few findings on the internet, see if you guys like it or not. Maybe if I like this video, I'll do more, I don't know. But, this one's pretty fucked up, so it's understandable if you don't like it. This is the behavioral sync. It's a rat experiment, and I have to say, before I really researched into this, I wouldn't say I was for or against animal testing, but this, dude, this was fucked up to the point where I was like, maybe we shouldn't be testing random shit on animals. But I also have to admit that there are benefits to this, and maybe it could be used to set up parallels to how humans would face these situations. Now, this is in no means like a full explanation of this. This is just like my summarized detailing of the parts that are like really what I think are really important. So basically, to explain this experiment, well, I say experiment, but it was really multiple experiments. But to start off, it was like a big, I think it was a 1/4 acre field that was enclosed, and this man Calhoun, JB, I don't know his real name, that's just what it says on the experiment thing, but he just took a bunch of rats and put them in this fucking field and was like, hey man, let's see what happens if we take out all the predators, give you as many resources as needed, and let's just sit back and watch. All right, and they did that. If I remember correctly, the expected outcome, I guess, of population of rats was supposed to be something like 5,000 adults total. Like, that's what the expected was supposed to be, but they ended up with like around 150, right? And I'm more of a scientist. I'm more of a science guy, but math isn't my strong suit, but that just doesn't, there's a massive disproportion there. So they were like, all right, let's better experiment this, see what's happening here. And they took some rats, right? They put those motherfuckers, or sorry, not some rats. I have the exact numbers. They took 32 in some, or like 2 cases, and 52 in one, or rats. They took 52 and 32 rats in separate experiments. Like I said, this was multiple experiment, and they put them into a 10 by 14 foot room. It was hard for me to visualize what this looked like, so I had to look up like what this would look like. So I'll throw up some pictures. If you've ever seen like a little home, like the little home shit on TV, that would be very similar. And I also haven't seen a rat in real life, so I don't know how many rats should fit in this enclosed space. But they took this area and they divided it into 4 different pins. So it'd be pin 1, pin 2, pin 3, pin 4. And it would sort of go in a C shape, so you could only go through it in a loop, and there was like an end. I don't know if that makes sense. I'll try and put up a picture to show what I mean, but it was like a C. You couldn't go end to end. You would have to go through the entire thing to get to one side to the other. Okay. Why this is important is because in the end cages where there was only one entrance, right, because you couldn't enter it through any other way, you'd have to go through everywhere else to get to that one. There's 2 ends and then 2 middles, but the 2 ends were almost completely normal. They had, or not normal per se, but as normal as could be, it had a couple adults and adult males, and they would just defend the entrance, like go to sleep on the ramp where you would enter, and they would just sleep there and thug it out, and then just mate, come back to the ramp, thug it out, protect it, make sure no other males came in there. But in the middle is where it really started getting interesting, I would have to say. So, I don't know if I said it earlier, but they were given every resource, being nesting materials, water, food, all that good stuff. But the ones in the middle cages, they showed very, very odd signs. And I say odd very liberally, because honestly, it was really fucked up. So, the rats in the middle, they didn't... The experiment says many times, if you're talking about like pure mass in a room, rats in a 14 by 10 foot room is not hard to fit. Like, they should be able to fit if you take everything like mentally out of the equation. They should be able to fit. It's not like it's a small room for them or anything. It's a pretty decent size, is what the experiment said. But because the rats were very stressed out because there's just too many rats in one area, too many what the experiment says over and over is too many social interactions, right? They don't know how to deal with that mentally. It's just too many rats in that small area. They would show rather weird signs. So they'd show signs of aggression. Weird signs of aggression, like overaggression. Some of them would they would fight for status, like how rats usually do. That's normal, but they would fight to the point of exhaustion, where they would literally die because they couldn't move anymore. They would win the fight, then die. They would, there was also signs of a lot of submission. There was just, what I like to call cuck rats, right? They'd just sit in the incels and they'd watch other rats mate. It's just weirdo shit. They also had like a specific term for a different type of rat. They were called probers. They would just basically go into every cell, and then they would just get their nut and go, man. So, but they would also get beat the fuck up. But, I didn't go too much into the rat cooking. I didn't like that. Something else they did was whenever they didn't die from fights or being jumped or something like that, other times it was mostly because they were just too stressed to do anything, and they would just lay there and die and, like, starve to death or thirst to death, which I thought that was fucking crazy. But something more physical that would happen in the rat was on the female rats, their reproductive and maternal behaviors would just completely turn off. So reproductive, they would just stop having sex and stop going into heat. But the maternal behavior, it's rats, female rats specifically, they have a very strong inclination to building a nest. And basically what they would do was just stop building nests, and they would just have babies on sawdust. Another big part of this experimentation that was fucking just weird, straight up just weird. A lot of the rats became sexual deviants, like I said earlier with the cuck rats, but some of them would be overly aggressive, and so usually rats, whenever they mate, they come outside of the female rat's burrow, and they wait for the female rat to come outside, then they do a little dance, and then they mate. But Whenever this experiment was going on, there was the probers. They would rush the mating process, and they would go into the room, and basically they would mate with the female rat. But because infant mortality was so high, it's very hard to say. It's they would go in there and eat the dead babies. Yeah, it's fucking crazy. Once again, I have to tell you, they had every resource needed. That they did not need to eat the babies. They just did it. Speaking about infant mortality, they were being cannibalized so hard. I don't know the exact rates, but in the experiment they said normal rat life expectancy for like infants is like 60%. But due to cannibalism, it went up to 90%. 80 to 90%. That is fucking crazy. And most of this was due to the rat mom not having any more maternity sense. They would pick up the child because they sense danger, right? And they'd try and bring it to a new nesting location, and half the time they would just fucking drop the baby for no reason, like in the middle of moving it, and just say, fuck this kid, dude, let's just leave it here, we don't need it. And right after the mom rat dropped the child, another rat would just pull up, be like, oh damn bro, someone left some leftovers, and just like, that's it, that's rats, man. Like I'm telling you, this was horrifying. It's insane. Let me see what else I got here. They would sometimes they'd go berserk. I know I said this earlier, I didn't go into it, but the rats would go berserk, and they would just start biting everything. They would bite. So usually rats just bite other male rats for dominance, like status. But in this case, they just did it for fun. They'd go into a berserk trance, and they would just start biting a child, a woman, a submissive rat. They wouldn't care. They would just bite everything. Yeah. And one thing so the man who made this experiment, his name was Mr. Calhoun, JB. Like I said, don't know his full name because I've only read the experiment, but he specifically stated at the end he wanted to make no further comments because everything about this experiment, like the results show themselves. But the one thing he did comment on is that the rats itself didn't die from like their environment most of the time. It would be from stresses that they had to deal with within that environment. I think that what he's referencing is that none of this would really happen if the same exact experiment happened on a similar colony of rats that were a normal size of like 12 to 20, right? Because like the experiment had like 43, something around there, amount of rats. It's like double the size of what the maximum recommended for that strain of rat. That's a crazy thing to say, a strain of rat. But the type of rat was usually 20, but they doubled the size, right? What they're referencing in that is, I think it's the cannibalism, berserker trances, stuff like that the colony faced. I mean, like, that doesn't normally happen. Rats don't eat other rats. They don't just, in the random wild, just start fucking each other up for no reason. But you may be wondering, Sam, how does this relate to real life at all? It just sounds like you want to talk about rat cannibalism for 10 minutes. Well, you're not wrong. I thought this was a horrifying research paper I read on a whim, and if I have to remember it, so do you, buddy. But also, there have been many comparisons online about the behavioral sink and how it relates to prisons, specifically overcrowded ones. Now, I can't say I know anything about prisons at all, but here's what the statistics say. If you don't want to read that, don't blame you. It's a lot. I'll sum it up for you. It says overcrowded prisons have more violence, racism, mental illness, and disease. Honestly, if you made it this far, props to you, man. But I'm still really bad at conclusions, so like and subscribe, and if there's any more weird research papers you want me to read, let me know.